police brutality has been an issue in our country for the entirety of the time that it's been around. But with the recent murder of George Floyd in 2020, there was a massive civil rights movement that was sparked. There were people marching in the streets for months after the fact, demanding accountability from the officers, body cams, defunding the police, abolishing the police. Lots of big changes were proposed. And I wrote this speech to attempt to persuade anyone who is on the fence about defunding the police, because I think defunding the police is one of the best steps that we can take in regards to human rights in our country. I am an activist. I've been studying political science for several years here at Eau Claire, and I've been able to do quite a bit of research on this topic for many papers and things like this project. So I believe I am pretty qualified to be able to share my findings. So my three main points today are, number one, that police officers have routinely shown that they have bias in who they convict, who they arrest, and who is convicted, right? Two, that police officers in the United States are responsible for far more violence and death than any other wealthy country in the world. And my third point is that the police really aren't actually legally required to help you. So for my first main point, the police officers have biases. We've seen this time and time again in research. In studies posted in 2019, we found that Black citizens are actually 2 times more likely to be killed at the hands of the police than any other racial or ethnic group. And it goes beyond just murder by the police. It's also just who's convicted of what. Black Americans are 3.7 times more likely to be convicted of marijuana-related charges despite similar usage to their white counterparts. Also, Black people only make up 12.4% of the population of the United States via the 2020 census, but they make up 38% of our prison populations. So any rational person looking at these numbers thinks like, oh, that's very different numbers. Why are there so many more Black people being accused, convicted of, or killed for crimes? That's a problem. That's a bias that the police departments maintain. These are very similar rates around the country. My second point, that police brutality is much worse in the United States than any other wealthy country in the world. There was another study posted in 2019 that found that out of the 10 wealthiest countries in the world, America was the top when it came to murders done at the hands of the police. It was found that police were responsible for 33.5 deaths per 10 million. And the next country on the list was Canada, which had the second highest, and it was 9.8 per 10 million. This equates to 1,099 deaths in America and 36 in Canada at the hands of the police. These are extremely different. That's a very, very high number comparatively, especially when all the other countries are even lower than Canada on that list. So we see that police are definitely responsible for much more violence in America than most other countries comparatively. My final point is that in the Supreme Court cases DeShaney v. Winnebago and City of Castle Rock v. Gonzalez, the Supreme Court actually ruled that it is not a police officer's constitutional duty to protect citizens. It's only their duty to protect citizens within their custody. So this means that if an officer were to see someone come at you and attempt to assault you, it is not actually their duty to protect you unless you are in their custody. They could just stand there and not be violating any constitutional provisions. And this is a little bit terrifying when we think about how the police are supposed to be protecting and helping us, but it is not actually their constitutional duty to protect us. The court reaffirmed this again when the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting victims sued and attempted to argue that the officers present should have done more to help them and could have saved lives. And the court again reaffirmed this decision and said the police have no obligation to help you. So when people argue that it is, what do you, like they say, what are you going to do if someone comes to assault you or someone breaks into your home? What are you going to do? Then you have to call the police. That's really your only option. But what if it wasn't? What if we could fight for a bigger system where we have more resources and social safety nets for people that are experiencing things like this? So you weren't immediately met with somebody with a badge and a gun. If you're having a mental health crisis, or if there's just a minor fight, bringing a weapon and being ready for combat is not always what people need. So I think that the main thing that people can do to try to help this problem is, one, to speak out. If you see a person of color interacting with the police, make sure that if you are white, you are using that privilege and you are observing the situation. And if you are able to, try to film and not leave that person alone with the police. Speak out when you see things like this, and fight for reform and defunding. Defunding sounds really scary, but defunding means that we would be investing into other communities and other social safety nets and social programs that would be able to minimize crime even more than the police could. Because having a police force doesn't inherently reduce crime. Community is what reduces crime. But I think that the best thing that we can do is fight for defunding and funding into our communities.